All right. So we are recording, screen showing. We should be good to roll. And again, if people have any questions or comments, you're welcome to type them in chat. Everyone is on mute, so I'll try and keep my eye on the chat as we go. So very quick touch-base review of what I covered last time, and that is what are kind of the foundation, what is motivational interviewing, and it is simply a way of being with a client. It is a way of having a collaborative conversation with them, figuring out what's important to them, both in terms of what their goals are and what's important to them in terms of what they value, what it is they want to achieve, what's their belief system, all of those things. And then you kind of explore what's the difference between what you say you want to achieve and what you say you believe is important to you and the way that you're behaving. In other words, often when we are in a situation where we need to make change or we are making change, it's because we want to head towards some goal behavior. And so what we're doing right now isn't necessarily working for us. So by increasing the distance between what you say you want and what you're actually doing at this point, it can help increase people's motivations to move towards what their goal is. So it's all about, when I say motivational interviewing, it's all about strengthening that motivation, making people want to change, be more interested in change, be more willing to explore the idea of change and what that would look like. And it's rooted in these 5 principles that it's about empathy and being willing to meet that person where they're at, to understand their universe, what's important to them, what they're feeling right now, and to accept them at that point. I talked a little bit already about what developing discrepancy means. Just kind of bringing to the surface and pointing out where their behavior is different than what their stated goals are or what their stated values are. As such, you're not really arguing with them. You're just pointing stuff out, and not in a snotty way. You're being present with them. You're pointing out what those differences are. What they choose to do with that difference is up to them, and that's what leads really to the roll with resistance, because some people may say, hey, I'm fine with that, or hey, I don't want to change right now, or this is not a priority, I got other things on my plate, and your response is okay, because you're the one in control, you're the one that has the reins. And then doing whatever to support any steps towards change, whether that step be a willingness to think about something, or willingness to actually do something, anything that's going to move them forward towards what their stated goals and values are. It's based on the idea of stages of change, and this applies to most of us in most situations where we begin perhaps not even knowing that we need to change or that there's an issue, and then we start thinking about it. That's the contemplation stage. Is this really what I want out of life? Is this really getting me where I want to be? Does this really match what I say is important to me? Developing that determination to actually do something, taking steps, and then trying to maintain that change. And quite often finding that there's reasons why we go back to whatever and then continue to think about it, become determined, and kind of move through this until we get to a point where we can maintain permanently, and then that's exiting from that wheel. And again, before I move on, I want to make it very clear that I'm drawing a very big distinction between this and the reasons why somebody may be living with an abusive partner, the reasons why somebody may be maintaining contact with somebody in their life that is a negative person for them. There's lots of reasons, and being in a particular stage of change may be just one of them. There are some very practical reasons. I have no transportation. I have no child care. The court has ordered me to maintain contact with this person. All kinds of reasons why not healthy people are in and around and in some cases controlling our lives that are about much more than stages of change. Okay, so that's the 2-minute, 3-minute reminder of what we're talking about here when we say motivational interviewing. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about what, instead of philosophy, what does it actually look like? What on earth am I supposed to say that would be motivational in nature? And here's your first acronym, if you will, and it's OARS. And what that stands for is open-ended questions, affirmation, reflective listening, and summaries. Now, if by any chance you have had me train in counseling skills or in crisis call, phone counseling, a lot of this is going to sound really, really, really familiar. For any of you that's had other kind of counseling training, a lot of it is going to sound familiar because we keep always coming back to what works. Same reason that domestic abuse perpetrators keep coming back to the power and control wheel, because those strategies work. As folks who are helpers, we keep coming back to these strategies because they work. So the first one, the open-ended questions, obviously that's something that can't be answered with a yes or no. It's what questions and how questions. And the idea is to really encourage that dialogue and exploration with somebody. You want to know where they're coming from. What do they believe in? What is their roadmap of who they are, what's important, who they are in relation to other people, what's their resources, what is their context for being able to take action in their life right now, and what stage of change are they at with whatever different issue brings them to you on that particular day. And of course, you're going to avoid the question why. You can have a wonderful, loving, compassionate tone when you ask somebody why. Well, could you talk to me about why you did that? But however loving and compassionate it might be, sometimes that question why still seems to demand that somebody defend themselves and that they have to, that they're accountable and they have to somehow explain. So it brings up defensiveness. So it's really about coming up with questions that are what and how. Some of my favorites. How does that, whatever that specific behavior or scenario or context is, how does that make you feel? How do you feel about blah, blah, blah? How do you feel about that? What happens when X, Y, or Z? What was it like before? Before you moved in with so-and-so? What was it like before you had a child together? What was it like before you told your parents this was going on? What makes you think it might be time for a change is a great question. Something has brought them to the table. Something has brought them to seeking out your services. What is that something? Oh, and by the way, if you Google or if you go to YouTube or some of these other internet video sites and look for motivational interviewing, you can see lots and lots and lots of examples of people using this technique, because it has become very widespread in the medical field, in the substance abuse field, counseling field, and there's lots of training stuff out there. So if you want to just kind of see it in action, take yourself to Google and take a look. So, of course, once you've asked a question, you can follow up with that. Tell me more about what your relationship with your mom was like before this came out. Tell me more about what happened when you went to court. Tell me more about what the law enforcement officers did when they showed up. One of the things that I think happens in our field is there's a lot of just flat out information we often need to know from people. Sometimes that information is simply about getting statistics, name, kids, where they, their zip code, you name it. There's stuff that we're supposed to gather for our stats. And then there's stuff that we often have to ask, are they safe right now? Do they have a restraining order? Trying to figure out what the immediate thing is going on, right? And it can sound like an interrogation accidentally. And so I would really encourage you to practice converting a lot or as many of those yes and no questions to those open-ended. So rather than saying, do you want to get a restraining order? How would a restraining order help or cause problems for you? You're going to get a whole lot more information. Do you want to get a restraining order? Maybe they don't even know. But if you say, how would it help and how would it hurt? How might it be a problem? You're going to get why they're there. You're going to get their feelings about it. You're going to know a bit more about, is this something they even want or something they've been told? So anytime you can convert a yes, no to a what or a how, I would go for it. Are you being abused? Well, what's been happening that led you to call today? It's a much broader question. And again, you'll get a sense of their emotional state. You'll get a sense of what information other people have been giving them about your services. Who knows what can come out of a simple question like that? Heck of a lot more than, are you being abused? Because there, the very first thing you're asking them to do is define abuse for themselves. And as we know, their definition may be very different than ours. Have you tried to talk to your landlord? What happens if you talk to your landlord? What would that be like? So again, try and do the what's and hows as much as possible. So that's open-ended is the first in the O, in the ORs. Second, affirmations. That's pretty easy. You guys do that all the time. If you can, the idea is to be specific if possible and not just say, hey, yay, great job, those are great. But if you can say great job about something specific they did, it's even more powerful. And so what you're building is for the client to be able to see, hey, wait a minute, maybe I actually do have some control here. Hey, maybe when I do take steps, things can actually work. For them, when somebody has stripped their control away, this is really powerful in terms of beginning to feel human again and beginning to feel that they are an adult and their input and their ideas matter. And of course, you can use affirmation to reframe for both of you. So the general stuff, easy to do. Wow, it's so hard that for somebody to call and talk to an anonymous person on the phone. I am very proud of you for doing something that was brave like that. Just even a, hey, it was good to see you today. I'm glad you checked in with me. Any of those things that are just about general stuff is boosting them up, is making them feel like you think they are an important human being. When trauma affects people, one of the things that it affects is attachment to other human beings, particularly when that trauma was caused by a human being. So when you're doing this kind of affirmation, you're basically working on just simply the relationship between you and that other person on a human-to-human level. I care about you. We are attached as human beings. You are important. When you get more specific, as I said, it can be even more powerful. Boy, that was scary. That phone call to to your employer, that took a lot of work. That was risky for you. You sounded great. I'm so glad you did that. You can catch people being strong, catch people being wise, catch people being careful, and pull it out and comment on it. They're stating what they need, or wow, you are a great self-advocate. That was, I'm really impressed by your self-care. You told so-and-so no. All kinds of things that you can pay attention to and just catch and comment on when you see it. Hopefully, reframing is something that you use all the time when you're doing affirmations, where they say something, maybe somebody else has told them that they're bad, or maybe society frames this particular action or behavior as bad, and you see it as a coping skill or protection or whatever, and so you pull that out and you reframe it for them. You know, you feel bad about lying to your mom, but I'm hearing someone being fiercely protective of their children. That's a powerful reframe. And it's not only powerful for the client, it can be powerful for you too when you're seeing behavior that might be awkward or difficult or frustrating or challenging for you, to reframe it first for yourself. How does this help that person to survive or to cope? And once you've latched onto it, and remembering that all behavior is communication, all behavior is functional in some way for somebody. What is that function? What need is it fulfilling? And pull that out. You know, another thing that I like about this is if you say that there's a lot of things where you go, oh, yay, great job, and they can just argue with it. But when you pull something out that's very specific, that is about your perception of them, your own experience of them, you're mad at yourself because you had a setback. I am looking at how much progress you've made. It's hard for them to argue with your experience. They can negate other stuff, but like, well, are you telling me what I'm supposed to think or feel or say? I don't think so. People usually won't go there. Okay, enough about that. Finally, we are going to celebrate success. Small steps and big ones. Celebrate, celebrate. Maybe we don't do enough of that about that. We're always so busy rushing forward to deal with the next crisis that we don't stop and celebrate enough. Okay, O-A-R, reflective listening. Again, to avoid that interrogation thing that sometimes happens, I would recommend trying to keep a 3-to-1 ratio. In other words, for every question that you ask, to have 3 other statements, 3 other reflections. Focus on their feelings, use your empathy skills, and focus on change talk. The nice thing about focusing on feelings, you know, wow, telling your boss about the abuse was scary, is that if you're wrong, when you make a statement like that, telling your boss about the abuse was scary, going to the doctor was frustrating because you had a ton of paperwork that you had to explain. If you're wrong about what they're feeling when you try and name it, they will tell you. So empathy is great. It's the one skill that works when you get it right, and it's the one skill that works when you get it wrong. They'll correct you, and you'll both now be on the same page. Oh, I get it. It wasn't frustrating. It was just, I'm trying to think, it was confusing because you didn't understand the paperwork yourself. Talking to your boss wasn't scary. It was embarrassing because you didn't want to have to share personal stuff that you're trying to get through right now. And when I say focus on change talk, it'd be something along the lines of you don't want to quit drinking, but you're worried that DHS might take your kids if you continue to use. So you're pulling out what those things are that they're contemplating and making that apparent to them. And yeah, I have some favorite words around that too. You feel whatever it is because whatever, and you can mix that up in whatever way feels comfortable. You sound emotion, you feel emotion, your emotion, because whatever it is they told you. While you say you feel angry, while you say you feel scared, while you say you feel calm, it sounds to me like, or it sounds like you also feel, while you say you feel ready to testify, it sounds like you also feel uncertain because you know the perpetrator is going to be there staring at you the whole time. And maybe you're picking that other stuff up from their body language, from things that you know about them before, from their language choice, from their tonal quality and what they say. But it's okay to pull that out and check it out with them. On the one hand, you're saying this, but on the other hand, you're saying that over there. That's a great way of developing discrepancy. On the one hand, you say that having a trusting relationship with your son is really important to you. But on the other hand, you aren't willing to ever loan him the car. I think we're on the S of ORs, summaries. And there's a simple process for that of just, first of all, hey, hang on, let me just summarize here. Or I'm gonna pull all this together, and you can tell me if I'm really getting the picture. And then you say what it is that they've told you throughout your conversation. Did I get it right? That's the checking for understanding. Is that right? Is that where you're at? Does that sound like the situation? And then the next thing is some kind of open-ended question to then push it along. Well, how do you feel about all these put-downs from your partner? That open-ended question to kind of push the conversation along that's a great place to bridge to some action planning or some action steps. What's one thing that could make your situation easier? Or what have you thought about doing about this? Very simple one. Anything that will, again, build the discrepancy, motivate them. And one of the things about that is if then you get a whole bunch of yes buts, you get a whole bunch of, well, I thought about this, but it wouldn't work. Well, I don't know because, and then they start talking about the problems and the feelings. You know that they're not in, you know where they are in the stages of change, that they're very early, that they're in contemplation or maybe even pre-contemplation. When you do that summary and you make that bridge to taking action and you get pushback, that tells you, oh, we're in a much earlier stage on that circle or that mountain or however you want to picture it of stages of change. And they're probably not going to be taking action. And the more that you push to try and force them to take action when they're not actually at that stage, you're just going to be pulling your hair out. So summaries also are a great way of kind of testing the water and figure out where are we along that particular path. Some things that you can listen for as you're having these conversations. As I said, are they on that path or not? Are they in that contemplation state? So listen for them self-identifying what their problems or issues are. I wonder if my time on the internet is just getting out of hand. Well, what makes you feel that way? What other things are you thinking you should be doing? How's being on the internet affecting your goals? Or just a statement. You feel concerned that being online messes with getting your homework done. So those in particular are the kinds of responses and statements that you want to pull out. My diabetes might not be so bad if I ate healthier. How is your diabetes causing problems? How would eating healthier make your diabetes better? Or that empathy statement, if you've asked so many questions. On the one hand, you want to feel better, but on the other hand, you tell me you're still eating the same way. Maybe I'm not such a bad parent. My son might be doing this behavior because of his dad. You know, he watched his dad doing it. What kind of things does your son do that remind you of his father? What things about your parenting are you feeling better about? That's a nice happy one that you can pull out of that. Maybe I'm not such a bad parent means I've taken some kind of mental step where I'm seeing things in a new way. So let's focus on that. What is that new way? So another acronym to focus on, another mnemonic, DARN. You're listening for things that express desire, things that talk about I want to change, I wish this was different, wouldn't it be great if, things that reflect ability. You know, I could, you know, I know so-and-so, and that would work. So things that reflect the ability to change, things that reflect the reasons to change. Here's what I value. Here's what I want. Here's what my goal is. And so keep latching onto those and reinforcing those. And similarly, the need. I should change. Why should you change? What are the things that change would help with? How would change be important to you? How would change improve things? How would change be more in line with your values? So you're listening for darn, and you're listening for cat. And some of you may be old enough to even remember the movie That Darn Cat. So the cat is that commitment. I will make change. If you're not hearing commitment towards it, if you're getting the yes but, they're not in that stage. So from pre-contemplation to that, the next stage where they're thinking, okay, what would it take? Do I have to that's the determination phase. Do I have to get help with this? Do I have to apply for such and such? Is this going to require money? Am I going to have to rally my support network? So what are they putting in place to make that change possible, make it work? And then finally the T on cat, to actually take some steps. Again, one of the things for us in the work we do is often what we're seeing is people that they're in the T thing, they're taking steps, but they are being forced to change without the commitment or the motivation to do it. It's other people making them. You have to call that agency and make them fix you so you aren't a victim anymore, or you have to move over here, or you have to go get a restraining order, or you have to sever this relationship, or you have to. And so they're being forced to take steps. And you'll hear that piece. They can tell you what they're doing, but I would say listen carefully for the other parts of that. And that will let you know, is this something they actually want to be doing? If the other parts of CAT aren't there, the commitment and the activation, I can guarantee you that the T, the taking steps, has a really low chance of success. They are probably going to fail because they don't want to be doing it. So when you see darn cat, that's when you're going to pounce. That's where you're going to ask them to tell me more about. What does that look like? What would fix this? In air quotes, what would fix this? What would that look like? You can ask for examples. Well, what happened the last time you spoke to your teacher about needing extra time for your assignments? What was the worst time that this happened? You can pull from the past, and this is something I've always found helpful for me, is to say, tell me who you were. Tell me who you were before this event happened. And those strengths and those resources, they're often still there, but they feel so cut off even from themselves that they forgot about them, or they don't know how to access them anymore. So tell me who you were, tell me what you're grieving, tell me what you've lost, can be a great conversation to look backward and pull those skills and those strengths forward to make change and move on. And then looking forward, what would happen if things stay the same? You always have several choices in any situation. And one of the choices that you always have is to do nothing. And that can be a legitimate choice. So what would happen if things stayed the same? What would happen if you don't respond to that? What would happen if? Is certainly worth exploring. At this point, I'm kind of moving into some more strategies that are really common as part of the toolkit to help you do the whole ORS piece. So certainly looking backward and looking forward are some very common tools to use. Another tool is asking for extremes. What's the worst that could happen? What's the best? When I have somebody who is scared to do something, I always say, well, what is the worst that could happen? Let's explore that. What is the worst? And almost always the worst is never as bad as we might imagine. Well, let's go ahead and plan for that, and you'll be prepared. And sometimes people seem to be more able to do it when they know that they're braced. And measuring is a great tool. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is staying in your current apartment? On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is staying in the same town as your extended family? On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is continuing to smoke? So you say that you're only at a 4 in terms of wanting to change. 1 being don't want to change at all. 10 being I'm absolutely should change and I'm working on changing. You say you're only at a 4, but what keeps you from being at a 2? So apparently there's been some movement. So what has made that movement? What might happen if you move to a 6? Or what would have to happen to move you to a 6? On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that you could stick to this exercise plan we just talked about? On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that that you could talk with your academic advisor about changing your classes? Exploring goals and values, I assume you already do. You just didn't know, perhaps, for some of you, that it fell under motivational interviewing. So this thing that you're engaged in, whether that's an external behavior, going and applying for food stamps, or packing up to move, or who knows what, you're the parenting thing of putting your child in timeout. How does that change in what you used to do? How does it fit with your goals and values? In some cases, you're like, yeah, fits great. I'm trying these new parenting skills, and it can be hard, and the kids, of course, are resisting because they liked it the old way when there wasn't a whole lot of rules. So, yes, it's working. Or, how does this change fit? Okay, so maybe I say that I want to parent in a different way, but I'm not actually. So, you're saying that you want to try some different parenting styles, but on the other hand, you just told me that every time you go to the grocery store and your child whines, you go ahead and give them what you want. How does that fit in with your goals around budgeting? Rolling with resistance. One of the principles of motivational interviewing is that since the client is the one who is defining what their problem is and coming up with the solutions for that, there actually shouldn't be so much resistance because they're the ones in the driver's seat, right? And so if you are encountering resistance, certainly pay attention to it, but it's best not to meet resistance with resistance. About 20 years ago, maybe even more than that, 20 years ago now, I was at a training with John Briere, and one of the things he said was client resistance is a red flag of practitioner error. In other words, the client knows more than you do about who they are, what their needs are, what stage of change they're in, how they're coping, how they're going to survive. And when they resist you, the very first thing you ought to do is ask yourself, am I making a mistake? Am I pushing them too far? Am I addressing the wrong issue? Am I not understanding? And so I've always remembered that. It makes so much sense to me. When you encounter resistance, their view of what's going on, their problem or their solution is different than yours. Or yes, they're still ambivalent about that change. The tally sheet in their head of pros and cons, you might have a different tally sheet than they do. Their tally sheet is it's pretty even. And making a change may not seem like it's in their best interest yet to them. And that may be because they know more than you and they're actually right. So the idea of even calling it resistance, there might be some philosophical things there. Maybe it isn't resistance. Maybe they have different and sometimes better knowledge. So what is recommended is to just come alongside. Perhaps Perhaps smoking or perhaps drinking is so important to you, you don't want to give that up right now. And if you have somebody for whom they are struggling with major barriers to safety, that is just not even on the plate. And to push that and have that be the focus of working with them, it's no wonder you're going to get resistance. So you're just naming it. Again, you come alongside them and you say what you're seeing. All behavior is adaptive. All behavior is communication. So what is being communicated to you? What purpose is that behavior serving? Are you moving too fast? Is the system moving that person along too fast? Are they being forced to change things that they don't want to change? Is whatever meeting a need, and there's nothing at this point to fill that need? So they're changing in terms of just not doing anything, but there isn't anything to fill the gap. So what is that about? You know, I've noticed that whenever we get close to ending the phone calls, that you frequently suddenly start talking about feeling suicidal. And so I'm wondering, is that something that you are really feeling? Are you wanting to continue the phone calls? What's going on with that? So you just check it out. What's happening? And hopefully you know what resistance looks like. Making excuses. Here's why I didn't do that. Here's why I was late. Here's why I forgot that. Here's why it's not my fault, somebody else did it. It can be challenging you directly. It can be outright hostility, and they may not even, they might be directing the hostility at you. Usually verbal, sometimes nonverbal, sometimes huffing, sometimes the silent treatment, sometimes the eye rolling. They may be expressing it at you, but it actually maybe be expressed at you, but it's about something else. It's about the fact that Child Protective Services is pushing them to a stage of change they don't want to be in, or their perpetrator, or their employer, or the housing authority, you name it. And so it's being expressed toward you. Lots of different ways that resistance can look. So if you're going to roll with it, you're going to accept that this behavior is working for them at this time to fill some need, that this behavior is communicating something. I've noticed that this is the third time that you haven't brought the paperwork that you need to fill out for that program. And so are you uncomfortable? Tell me what that's about. Maybe they don't want to be in that program. Maybe they're embarrassed. Maybe they don't know how to write or read, or they don't have access to a computer, all kinds of things. So the best ways to roll with resistance: acknowledge their perception, acknowledge their disagreement. You don't think taking your medication every day is really necessary. You're rather discouraged. You're discouraged about trying to exercise again. You're discouraged about calling to apply for more jobs. This is their reality. You think that you're going to die anyway, and so using or not using won't make any difference about where and when that happens. So as far as you're concerned, you might as well use. You can reframe for them. They say, "Oh, I've tried to, I've talked to 3 different attorneys, and nothing works. I get the runaround. I get different answers every time." You can say, you can reframe that. My goodness, you're very, very persistent, even though that sounds so discouraging. So this must be very important to you. I tried quitting smoking 4 times. I can never stick with it. Wow, you've put a lot of effort into this already. Every time you get closer, a lot of people have to try many, many, many times before they change that. So it sounds like it's important to you. Arguing for the status quo might sound a little risky, but basically it's saying, you're right, I don't think you should do anything. And kind of by doing that, what happens is the situation flips and the client ends up in the position of arguing for the change. I can think of one person that I worked with who was to call her a chronic worrier would be the understatement of the year. I mean, it was astonishing how much she was able to worry. And we, saying, oh, you don't need to worry about that, or you're wasting a lot of time worrying about that, or there are better things for you to be doing and more productive things for you to be doing, and you need to be X, Y, D, Z, and instead you're just bound up and incapacitated by your worry. All of those things really didn't work. And so what did work was to say, wow, I understand why you're worrying. I understand why worrying is so important to you. So let's figure out specific times when you can worry. Let's set aside parts of the day that are your worry times. And so, I don't even remember, from noon to 1, that is your worry hour. And you can sit down and write out absolutely every single thing that you could possibly be worried about and what could go wrong. And by prescribing the symptom, you can do it once or twice, but then it seems so stupid that she ended up not, it was kind of weird to only to have this one time when you really had to worry really hard, and she kind of ran out of things to worry about to quit worrying. It's a strange phenomenon to argue for them to do the thing that is the barrier. But it can work. You are arguing the opposite of change, and they end up having to list all the reasons why, not having to, but they do list all the reasons why they should change. I don't know that I explained that very well, but it is a technique, and it can work in some circumstances. Decisional balance. I brought this up a little bit earlier, and this is the idea that we all make our choices based on this ongoing list in our heads of, is this going to be to my benefit? What's the pros of doing this? What are the cons of doing this? It's all the time. It's an ongoing thing in our head. And so one of the strategies is to deliberately pull that out and examine it and say, what are the good things and the not so good things about change? What are the good things, not so good things about this choice? What are the good things, not so good things about this behavior that you're doing? And as people go through the stages of change, this balance will shift. When people are not even in the contemplation stage, when they're pre-contemplative, everything is in the pro list. There's no problems with what's going on. There's no problems with what they're doing. When people are in the contemplation stage, that's when the cons are starting to appear and begin to weigh down the other side, and they're kind of going back and forth, and they have this ambivalence. And it isn't until that ambivalence is resolved by tipping towards, oh, doing what I'm doing now actually doesn't help me. That's when people begin to plan and to take steps. And this process then doesn't stop. You continue to judge as I'm working through whatever it is in my life, and this choice I made, is it still working for me? That goes on pretty much forever. In the maintenance stage, the pros should be so far outweighing the cons that it's not even really a question anymore. It's almost like back to the pre-contemplation stage where I know what it is. I don't even have to spend time worrying and thinking about it. It's just that it's entirely flipped. One simple strategy is giving people lots of information, and this is something that we do all the time. We always give information about PTSD and parenting and resources that are available, and sometimes we work to build people's skills and to access resources, how to ask for help, how to get a job, how to do this, how to do that. Lots of skill building goes along with information and exploration. Sometimes people explore by simply experimenting. What do you think will happen if you tell your best friend about this assault? Well, I think that they'll be understanding, and I think that they'll be supportive, but I'm afraid that they might, pull out all the same victim blaming stuff that the larger society does, and I might lose that friend, or they might disappoint me, or they might hurt me even more by not believing me. And so you work through what's the worst that could happen, what's the best that could happen. You could practice skills in terms of how to tell it, and then they can experiment. They can tell part of the story. Or they can talk about, hey, I heard this thing on TV and I saw this, and what do you think? Kind of like, and get a feel for what their friends' attitudes are about that particular, domestic abuse or sexual assault in general. And then come back. Well, did that experience meet their expectations? They were able to explore and, again, build skills and have new ideas and experiences that broaden their idea of what they are capable of and what is possible in the world. Magic questions. Magic questions, I think, are probably my last strategy that I have for today. And there's many, many variations of this. If you had a magic wand and you could change one thing about your situation, what would it be? That helps you to target what the most important or the most valued thing is. And again, it might be entirely different than what you're identifying or what their family and friends or community is pointing out, but it's what matters to them. If you woke up tomorrow and overnight, this behavior, whatever it is, or this situation, if it had magically changed but you didn't know it, what would be different? That helps to explore, is it going to be in my interest for this change to happen? How would I feel? How would I behave? To what extent would that make my life better? Or maybe to what extent might that present some not so helpful things? How could you tell if it had changed? What are the visible signs? And those kind of translate into visible steps of change. Those are just two versions. There's lots of magic wand type questions. And again, because they're completely hypothetical, and you can say, let's just brainstorm on this one. What if? You can do it in the positive. I think these are kind of positive ways. If you want to, you can do the negative. What if you had a magic wand that would make the worst thing happen? I don't know, maybe not a magic wand. Maybe there you want a bottle of poison or something. What would that look like? Let's go there. That's what you're afraid of. Let's see if that's really likely. And let's see if we can take some steps so that even if the worst happened, it wouldn't crush you, that you're prepared to deal with it. Those are great questions. They're used in various social work, mental health, change type fields all the time. So, as I said, there's not really a means by webinar to practice skills. It's really just giving you the map of what motivational interviewing looks like, what it can look like, and all the different strategies you can have in your toolkit to help people, because our clients are, if nothing else, the whole reason that they are talking to us in the first place is because their life is in a state of change. Honestly, all of our lives are in a state of change all the time. Change is the only unchanging thing in the universe that you can depend on, right? So what motivational interviewing does is it allows you to come alongside as a partner with folks on their journey. It allows you to help them to explore their feelings and their values and their goals. You're an explorer or a researcher or whatever, an adventurer, whatever framework works good for you as a model, as a visual, exploring the importance, what's important to them what matters to them, what are the things they want to keep, what are the things they want to let go of. So exploring importance of change, exploring competence, where do they have skills, where are they afraid, where are things beyond them at the moment, exploring their barriers, exploring strategies for getting over those barriers, exploring their setbacks. What happened? So last time that you came in here and we did on a scale of 1 to 10, you said you were feeling great about this, that you were at an 8. And, today I'm talking to you and you're saying that you're at a 4. So what happened? What's the difference there? So exploring their setbacks and, of course, exploring their successes. What are the things that made this possible? Because if you can figure out what those things are and you can replicate them, then all kinds of other things are possible. Are there any comments or questions about that? Because that's my scoop on my part 2. There are a couple people that came in a little bit later. I did record this. I will be uploading it to iCadva's YouTube channel, and I will send out the link to both this one and the first one, as well as the PowerPoints from this one and the first one to the Google groups, so that you have easy access if you want to review. If there are folks who didn't get a chance to see it or only saw part of it, because as we know, sometimes life doesn't let you sit down long enough to participate in an entire webinar, whatever. I will make it available. Okay, I'm not seeing any comments or questions. So my last thing is that, yes, because these are such useful tools in a broad range of fields, it's not hard to find motivational interviewing training. I would in the future like to try and put some together through iCadva, but I would really encourage you to not wait around for us to put some together, but to look around your community and see where other avenues of getting direct training where you can do role plays and get experience with it, where that's available. It may not be. You might have to do some translating in your head with what kinds of scenarios that they use, but you're all over that. You can figure that one out, no problem. And so with that, I guess I will say thank you for spending part of a Tuesday afternoon with me. And everybody have a rest of a good day and a rest of a good week.